again, everybody, and welcome to Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I'm Paul Dottino. Here's Matt Citak. We're going to be here for the next hour, and we're not just talking Giants football with you, but we're talking college football. We're talking prospects. John is down at the Shrine Bowl in Texas. The Senior Bowl is going to be coming up later on this week. Whole bunch of things going on, so this is not a dark week. Okay, this is a busy week, folks. We don't have any NFL games being played. We got the Super Bowl coming up in a couple weeks, but it is nonetheless a busy week. We know what happened yesterday in the AFC-NFC Championship games. So there's a lot of stuff that you can call us about at 201-939-4513. All right, Matt, first things first. Before we do anything else, the Giants have themselves another Pro Bowl guy.
Yes, it was the Giants announced today that Malik Nabers has been named to the 2025 Pro Bowl games. He obviously got voted in as a alternate when it was announced last month, and then due to an injury to Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions, he will not be participating, and Malik Nabers has taken his spot. So Malik Nabers officially a Pro Bowl wide receiver. And
it's pretty cool.
Very, deserved with the season that he had.
And the beauty of it is, for me, is that the arrow is going to go up. He was a Pro Bowl receiver this year in what I thought was a somewhat sketchy, raw rookie season. There is a lot more potential on the plate once he gets polished up and he matures physically, mentally, and with the playbook. The sky's the limit for this guy. This is only the beginning. That's what's really cool about it.
Yeah, and the one thing you didn't even mention just then is the quarterback position could not have been more unsettled this past season. I mean,
I'm trying to forget about that.
Malik Nabers had this Pro Bowl season catching passes from 4 different quarterbacks. That is not the stability that you strive for at the most important position on the field. Hopefully, throughout this offseason, again, whether it's through free agency, trade, draft, hopefully that position is a lot more settled going into the 2025 campaign. And I mean, it can't be more unsettled than this past year. Yeah. So one way or the other, it will, we'll have a little bit more stability at that position. And so I agree. The arrow is pointing up for Malik because once he has, his guy throwing it to him, whoever that might be, those numbers are going to jump off the page even more than they already did as a rookie.
The Giants' last 2 Pro Bowl wide receivers, of course, Odell Beckham Jr., back in 2016, I want to say. Did you do an article on this?
Sounds right. Odell.
And before that was Victor
2016
Cruz, right?
was his 3rd in a row. 2016 was the last.
Right. And before him was
Victor
Cruz.
Let's see if the great Mike Eisen mentioned that.
You didn't write it?
No, this is
Usually you write these things.
This is from Mike Eisen.
Okay.
He wrote it up himself.
Okay.
Yeah, no mention of Victor Cruz, but that sounds right.
Cruz was the previous receiver to make the Pro Bowl before Odell Beckham Jr. So, hey, good news for Nabers. The 2 things that I will want to see him improve upon, I will want to see him do better with yards after the catch, which the quarterback will have something to do with. And I also would like to see him cut down on his drops. He did have 11 by my count for the season, but only 1 over the last 5 games. So he was already getting better down the stretch. And we also saw some better yak yardage also down the stretch too, as opposed to earlier in the season. So those were hints of what may be to come in year 2. And of course, the thing is, he's going to have to get used to a new quarterback, whoever it is.
Yeah.
That'll be a situation that he's just going to have to cultivate.
And, this is kind of connected to the yards after the catch, but I just want to see him break off some big plays, some more big plays, which obviously goes hand in hand with the yak. But I'm talking also in terms of breaking some tackles, which we saw on that, was it the 59-yard touchdown against the Colts?
Yes, we did.
That was the Malik Nabers that, that play was the play I think we were waiting all season to see. He had a great season, obviously, up to that point. But that play in particular, that is what, I feel like we were really waiting to see throughout his entire rookie year. And he saved his best for the second to last game because that Colts game, he showed why the Giants drafted him 6th overall and the potential he has to grow into one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, he's already well on his way to that after just one season. So the sky's the limit for this kid.
2 100-yard games in his final 4 games of the season, 3 100-yard games overall. Did catch 7 touchdowns for the year, which for a Giants receiver, that's not too shabby, to be honest with you, especially coming out of the box. The Giants don't usually have a big touchdown grabber. Usually they get a lot of rushing touchdowns. But, of course, the Giants have had trouble getting any touchdowns over the course of the last 2 years. Not to be funny, but that's just a fact. The team has been offensively challenged. So for him to do what he did when everybody in the stadium and everybody at home knew he was getting the ball, that does say something for him. And we also know he played dinged up the whole second half of the season.
Yeah, he was on the injury report pretty much every single week from like the first, once he came back from the concussion, almost every week from that point on, he was on the injury report with something. And he played through it all, showing his toughness. I mean, he finished the season with 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 10 straight games with at least 5 receptions to end the season, set the new NFL record for rookie wide receivers of games with 5 receptions or more. Set it with 14 games. 14 of his 15 games, he had at least 5 receptions. That's crazy.
Yeah. And his final reception total was what, 112?
109.
109.
Brock Bowers had the rookie record with 112.
Bowers, of course, a tight end, which means that Nabers does hold the rookie wide receiver record in NFL history.
Yes, beating Puka Nakua's record from last year.
Ironically enough, Nakua had like a dozen drops in his rookie season also.
Yeah.
Which, again, rookies will make rookie mistakes. Sometimes it's a concentration lapse. Sometimes it's being too eager to take off with the ball, before you secure it. And those things happen. They'll get smoothed out over time.
Especially with a lot of targets.
So, I was about to say, he had
no doubt
somewhat high number of drops, but when you think about he had 170 targets, which is among the most in the NFL.
That's why I mentioned Nakua, because both guys were within a couple of catches of each other, and they both had about a dozen drops.
Yeah, and same thing goes for Puka Nakua last year with the amount of targets he got. He was getting an insane number of targets as well. So, actually, rookie wide receivers are going to have some drops. That's not surprising in the slightest. It's not concerning. If 2-3 years from now we're still talking about Malik Nabers having a lot of drops.
No. Don't go there. Don't go there.
I'm just saying that would be another story. But as a rookie, some drops is not the not the end of the world.
All right, real quick before we get to your phone calls at 201-939-4513. This is a big week for these college all-stars. Remember, juniors are eligible since last year to go to the Senior Bowl and to go to the East-West Shrine Game. That's a big deal because it means these guys will have other opportunities outside of their pro days and the combine to try to impress NFL scouts. Now, over the course of the last 2 weeks, we have learned that additional Giants coaches from this staff have been added to the All-Star Game coaching staffs. That's a big deal because, for example, last year, Mike Kafka was with the Shrine Bowl.
Yep.
And what happened? Muasau and Tracy both wound up drafted by the Giants. And I can tell you for sure, those coaches knew something about those players from being there during their all-star weeks. So quickly, I want to get Matt to update us on exactly who is where, because I believe it's now up to 6 Giant staffers.
7 total.
Is it 7 now?
Yeah.
See that? It's now up to 7 Giants coaches who are at the 2 all-star games.
Yeah, so just real quick, I'll say, obviously, no one likes when your team ends up as one of the, record-wise, one of the worst teams in the league. However, one small benefit is these college all-star games, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, they take coaches from those teams that are towards the top of the draft, and those teams are the guys that predominantly, run the coaching staffs of these college all-star games. So you'll see Browns coaches, Titans coaches, and in this case, fortunately, 7 Giants coaches between the 2 games. So just a small silver lining to, this past season and everything that went down. But the Shrine Bowl, which practices began on Saturday, Sunday, today, tomorrow, and the game itself Thursday. Shane Bowen is one of the head coaches, and Coach Eggs, the linebackers coach for the Giants, is a defensive coordinator. In these all-star games, they have the coach up format where whatever assistant coach, whatever role they have serve with their NFL club, they basically get a quote unquote promotion in these college all-star games.
Right.
So Mike Kafka is one of the coaches at the Senior Bowl this week. Practices begin tomorrow. Mike Kafka is a head coach. We then have Joel Thomas.
He's with the American, right?
With the American team, yes. It's the American team and the national team at the Senior Bowl. Mike Kafka is the head coach for the national team. Sorry, the national team.
Oh,
and then
my bad.
Joel Thomas, the Giants running backs coach, is the offensive coordinator for the American team. Mike Adams, who is the Giants assistant secondary coach, is coaching the American team defensive backs.
Mm-hmm.
You have James Ferentz, who is the assistant offensive line coach. He's coaching the American team offensive line. And then Angela Baker, offensive assistant. She is coaching the tight ends for the American team. It's the second year that Angela has been a tight ends coach at one of these all-star games. She was the tight ends coach at the Shrine Bowl last year. Also the second year Mike Adams is serving on one of these coaching staffs. He was a coordinator, a special teams coordinator at the Senior Bowl last year. Obviously, this past season, he switched from special teams, assistant special teams coach to assistant secondary coach. So that's why now he is doing coaching the defensive backs at the Senior Bowl. So the Giants are very well represented at these all-star games. They are going to get great experience to see these guys up close and personal, get their hands on them, meet with them, talk with them, see how they interact with, their teammates, other players, how they take and accept, instruction and technique, guidance. So this is a really big week for the Giants. A lot of top prospects, maybe not all the guys that are, in the running to be the Giants' number 3 pick. Not a lot of them are going to be at these two college all-star games. Shedeur Sanders was at the Shrine Bowl, although he wasn't participating in activities. He was just there to sort of meet with the media and, meet with teams.
Don't get caught up with the 3rd pick. You and I both know the draft is about all the picks.
No, for sure.
So
but I just wanted to make it clear that, some of these other names that are being discussed as possibilities for the Giants at number 3, you're not going to see those guys for the most part at these college all-star games.
These staff members are more vital going later in the draft.
For sure.
As you go past the 2nd day, you get into the 4th round on the 3rd day, that's when these coaching staffs are going to be very critical in telling some of the scouts and the personnel people, hey, while we were working with these kids for 4 and 5 days, we ferreted out some of this stuff. That's where that's going to be most important, really, to be honest.
Yeah, and
3rd day.
And this year in particular, at the Senior Bowl, the quarterbacks that are going to be at the Senior Bowl aren't the quarterbacks that are likely going to be in the conversation for the number 3 pick again. But if the Giants don't go quarterback in the 1st round and decide they want to maybe attack the position on day 2, well, the Senior Bowl, the whole crop of Senior Bowl quarterbacks, those are the guys that are in the running to be those day 2 draft picks. Like Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart.
Yeah. Now, Holland declined.
Who?
Holland from Howard.
Oh, Will
Howard.
Howard. Yeah, Will Howard just bowed out.
Will Howard bowed out because he was in the championship game in college.
And, after a 16
which is a shame.
16-game season.
Because we were all kind of intrigued as to how the playoffs are going to help his stock. We just don't know, and he's not going to the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, he is not, unfortunately. But, again, Milroe, Jackson Dart, you still have Dylan Gabriel. And Kyle McCord is at the Shrine Bowl, and apparently he's been one of the standouts so far. So there definitely are other quarterback prospects, not, the guys 1 and 2 in the quarterback rankings, but guys that are vying for that QB3, QB4 spot. Those are guys that are participating in these college all-star games. So the Giants coaches that are at these 2 games, they're going to get plenty of up-close experience with all these guys.
By the way, NFL news while we are doing this show live, in case you're listening on the archive. Right now, Brian Schottenheimer is being introduced as the Dallas Cowboys' new head coach. Of course, everybody knows him from his time with the Jets, among other things, being the son of Marty Schottenheimer, one of the great coaches of the last 30 years. 201-939-4513. What do you got?
Did you see who the name being linked to the Cowboys for defensive coordinator is now? Coming out today?
I did not.
It's not official, but reportedly
by who?
The favorite by
ESPN or NFL Network?
NFL Network.
NFL Network?
And ESPN. All the beats, basically. All the national writers. I mean, Matt Eberflus seems to be the favorite.
From the Bears.
From the Bears. Seems to be the favorite for the Cowboys defensive coordinator position because it sounds like Mike Zimmer is leaning towards retirement. Or either way, he's not going to be back with the Cowboys. So Matt Eberflus, former Bears head coach, seems to be at least the favorite to be the Cowboys' new defensive coordinator.
All right. Now it's time to get to your phone calls, folks, at 201-939-4513. At some point in a little bit, we hope to discuss some of the Shrine Bowl standouts. John Schmeelk is out there in Texas. We hope to hear from him, unless he's too busy eating some barbecue ribs. But we're going to hope to hear from John in just a bit. And remember, as always, the Giants Huddle podcast is available on all of your favorite Giants podcast platforms, as well as Apple Podcast and Giants.com/podcasts. Long-form interviews. John's been doing a whole bunch during this All-Star week. I know he's headed, I think it's tomorrow he's headed to the Senior, right?
Yeah.
So he's hopping and bopping.
Or he might be leaving today because practices begin tomorrow morning, and I'm assuming he wants to be there.
So he's probably leaving tonight then.
My guess is he's leaving tonight, yeah.
God bless him. From the middle of nowhere, Texas, to the middle of nowhere, Alabama, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. 201-939-4513. All right, let's go to the phones. And Kevin from Pennsylvania is first on the show. Hello.
Hey, how are you, Paul and Matt?
Hello.
Good. How's it going, Kevin?
Yeah. Well, coming off of being down here in the Philly area yesterday was out of drudgery. I don't even know where to go further. Watching the Eagle Nation go nuts yet
There's
again.
always Kansas City, my friend. Take it easy. There's always Kansas City.
It could be worse, right? Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to get your thoughts on really deals with the success that a GM, and I'm thinking because it's just been inundated with information, but Howie Roseman at Philadelphia. So when you talk about building a consistent team that year after year is in the mix, so to speak, you start to look and say, what is it taking to do something like that? And I was like scratching my head saying, we let somebody like Saquon Barkley go for the reasons that have been talked about, for months on end now, the financial commitments and whatnot. But it struck me, I said, Philadelphia made a massive contract commitment to their quarterback. They have major commitments to top-shelf receivers, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and yet they somehow, some way, with all the salary cap rules and regs, had enough money to fling at what should be a perennial star in Saquon Barkley. And I quite frankly don't understand why Joe Shane just seemingly is way behind the eight ball when you do a compare and contrast.
The one thing I will say about this is some of the moves that the Eagles made this past offseason, the past couple off seasons, those are moves you make if you are a win. Oh, I guess we lost Kevin. If you are in
I'm sure he can listen
win now mode. Because if you look at the Saquon contract in particular, but a lot of the free agent contracts that Howie Roseman has given out this past offseason, the past couple of off seasons, there are a lot of, void years added. And if you look down the road, past this year, 2025, 2026, 27, beyond, you will see that a lot of these contracts that they have signed players to have dead money in those future years, which if you're in a win now mode and you have a team that you think can win a Super Bowl this season,
you got to do it.
You make moves like that because you got to go all in to try to win a Super Bowl. However, eventually, you keep kicking the can down the road. Eventually, you're going to have to pay up. We saw it last offseason with Buffalo. The Bills had to cut several starters and big name players because they did not have the salary cap to keep them because they kept on adding void years, kicking the can down the road, and eventually you have to pay those dead cap hits.
Somehow it worked out for the Bills, though.
It did, but we're seeing it again now with the Saints. The Saints are in an awful salary cap situation because for years and years and years, they kept on kicking the can down the road. And again, they were trying to win a Super Bowl. Frankly, they didn't come very close in recent years, but they were trying. You can't, knock a GM for trying. But now they are in an awful salary cap situation. So I hear what you're saying, but it wouldn't have made sense this past offseason for, Joe Schoen to structure some of the deals the way that Howie Roseman did for the Eagles. Because the Giants, I don't think, went into this season thinking Super Bowl or bust, which is basically how the Eagles went into this season, saying we need to win a Super Bowl, otherwise this season is a failure. So when you're a GM and you're going into a season with those high expectations, you kick the can down the road. You fit as many good players under contract this year as you can, and you worry about the cap consequences later. You worry about that down the road.
In short, without knowing that their rookie class was going to be so productive, and it turned out to be really good this year in Philadelphia.
Yep.
But without knowing that, in March, when they started to reconfigure their roster, they're thinking that this window could be closing really, really quickly, within another year or two tops. So what did they do? They went and they spent money. And that's what you do. When you know that the window is closing, you take the chance, you pull out that credit card, and you charge a bunch of bucks to the next year or two, knowing that in year 3 and year 4, it's going to squeeze. You just know it.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. Okay? Now, Cowboys got some problems too. Okay? Because of a few very high-priced and one could say overpriced players that are going to squeeze them too. That's the way it goes. Now, for example, according to Over the Cap, coming up this year, the Eagles have just under $19 million in cap space as of now, according to Over the Cap. Now, that's going to be fluid. We tell you that all the time. It's going to be fluid, and there are some things you can do to move it. The Giants, on the other hand, have over $43 million, according to Over the Cap. So you're talking over double in terms of available cap space to try to do some deals. Now, when you're in the position that the Giants are in, you're going to need to use that money to get not just one star player or overpay one guy. We've talked about this. The Giants are probably better off grabbing a few second-tier free agents. They need guys who are bargain prices, reasonable prices, guys who are looking to resuscitate their careers, or guys who got lost in the market shuffle and are going to come in at a much more cap-friendly deal. Okay? Guys like Illuminor and Runyon, who were quality starters for this team this year, it's not unheard of to pay more than what the Giants paid for them. They actually got pretty good value on both of those players, Matt.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what the Giants are going to try to do again this year because they need quantity of players, not necessarily getting the one big fish. I hope that answers the question. It may not make you happy because you're seeing the Eagles going to the Super Bowl. I totally understand that. But they were all in on Barkley. They paid more than anybody else was willing to pay. They took the risk that he wasn't going to get hurt, and he didn't. And now he's got them to the ultimate game. They rolled the dice, and it paid off. We go back to the phones. Aiden in New Jersey, you're next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Paul. How's it going?
Okay, how are you?
I'm good. So first, I have a question for you. It correlates, Paul. You'd be proud. I made up my own homework assignment.
Very cool. I hope it was worthy.
Oh, yes, it's first. So this is the question for both of you. We're going back in time. You know Saquon's not going to stay with the Giants. Don't go with the financials that, actually happen off of what you think. Would have you, in the same free agency board, would you still go with Devin Singletary?
Well, you'd have to go back now, not just this past offseason, right? Because you'd have to look at, remember, every free agent class and every roster building move is actually part of a 3-year plan. So you'd actually have to compute, okay, going forward, if you don't think that Barkley's going to come back. Now you have to say to yourself, okay, how are we going to address the running back situation? And they went with Tracy. And I don't know, I'll be frank with you, I don't know what the Giants expected out of Tyrone Tracy this year. Did they get more than they thought?
I mean, I would think so. You spend a 5th-round pick on a wide receiver turned running back who has had literally 1 year of experience playing the running back position. I don't think when they made that pick, they were thinking this guy's going to be our primary ball carrier this year.
Yeah, probably not.
I feel like they probably thought, maybe we'll get something out of him this year, but a little bit more of a project. Because, again, he only had 1 year of playing the running back position. Clearly, Tyrone Tracy exceeded expectations.
Yeah, I guess he did.
As a rookie.
I guess he did.
If you could tell the front office, yeah, you're going to draft this guy in the 5th round. He's going to end up being your primary ball carrier. He's going to look great. Maybe then, if you know that, maybe you approach last offseason a little differently when it comes to the running back position.
Yeah.
But that was so far from a guarantee. If they had not went out and signed a veteran running back of some capacity, then going into the draft, running back would have been up there among the top priorities instead of being sort of like a luxury pick that Tracy turned out to be and one that hit.
Now, to be fair, in training camp, Tracy looked like he was going to be this player.
For sure.
But you didn't know that in April.
Exactly.
We knew that in August. In August, he looked like he was going to be really good, and he turned out to be really good. You're right. In April, they probably didn't know that. I think that's fair.
I think they probably expected him to be the number 2 running back on the team or compete with Eric Gray to be the number 2 running back. I don't want to speak for the front office, but I don't think when they made that pick in April, end of April, that they were like, this 5th-round pick is going to be our starting running back for most of the season this year and play really well.
So how does this apply to Singletary? Singletary was signed for a couple of reasons. And remember, he was also a pretty good bargain. He did not come in very expensive. They brought him in here because they knew him from Buffalo. They loved his character. They loved his locker room leadership. They loved his maturity. They thought that whoever the next young back was going to be, and Tracy turned out to be that guy, he'd be a great mentor for him. I think they got all of that.
And they loved his durability. I mean,
he's never hurt.
He missed 1 game in the previous 4 seasons before signing with the Giants.
And by the way, every year until this year, he's gone to the playoffs as the lead back for the team that he played on. Yeah, so he's also a winner. So you know what, Aiden? I'm going to tell you it wasn't a bad pickup.
I'll explain the homework assignment.
So I'm thinking the homework assignment is, I think they probably would have signed Singletary anyway.
I did a different research. I'll tell you what I did. So I went through all the running backs, all the teams that made the playoffs. Well, I excluded Kansas City because Pacheco was hurt most of the year. And I went through the percent of carries the lead back got versus whoever got the second amount of carries, just running back. I'm realizing that I think it's going back to starting to be a one-back league. I know it's been more of a split as of recent. I mean, Tracy, I looked at Tracy's. He was 63%. In the previous 2 years, Barkley for the Giants, it was 82 in 2023, then 85%. I feel like for success, I think in this league, it's more going back to a one back, except I think there's a few exceptions like Tampa Bay and Detroit. And I was wondering, what would your preference be? I mean, I'm nothing but pleased what Tracy did, but if you think it's better off to go to a one back, or if the Giants should have addressed somebody, that's not going to be splitting carries. I mean, running backs are so replaceable in today's day and age.
All right, Aiden. Well, thank you for the call. I think you've now given us a second question. That's not the same question.
Yeah.
The first question was, would you have signed Singletary? And I think I'm going to go with yes. I think for what he brought them, he gave them what they were looking for. So I would say yes. I think that was a reasonable move.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it certainly was a reasonable move. Even looking back, yeah, I mean, you couldn't have gone into the season with Tyrone Tracy and Eric Gray being basically your only two running backs. You needed to bring some veteran in.
And by the way, you have to consider the finances too. And Tracy was relatively inexpensive.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And then the other item he was asking, and then we're going to get to John. He's down in Texas right now, so we'll talk to him in just a second. The other item he was asking was in terms of going to a one-back. Look, I still believe the Giants need a big bruiser in that running backs room. It's much like I always believe every wide receiver room should have a skyscraper. I believe every running backs room should have a bruiser. If you want him to be a pure fullback, and he can also carry the ball on occasion when necessary, fine. I don't care if he's a fullback or he's just a big, physical, tough, you-know-what halfback. I think there needs to be a bruiser in the room. Devin Singletary is a undersized, physical guy. But he's not a bruiser because he doesn't have the stature to be a true bruiser. He plays like one, but he doesn't quite have the size to really do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but to answer Aiden's question specifically, what my preference is, I would prefer to have two backs that I trust and that I could put back there. It doesn't have to be a 50-50 split, but two guys that are getting, numerous carries every single game. That is what I'd prefer to do. The way that Detroit has set up their run game, obviously they're one of the best, if not the best run games in the entire NFL, but that is how I would love to have my backfield set up. Two reliable, productive runners in the backfield. I don't want to have my entire backfield resting on the shoulders of one player, because if that guy gets hurt, then what? Then you're going to a backup who's barely any playing time.
Right.
It's barely any experience. I mean, you brought up Saquon. Obviously, Saquon has been one of the best running backs in the league since he came into the league 6 years ago. But if you look, other than his rookie year, Saquon only had one season where he stayed fully healthy after that with the Giants. One of his final 5 seasons with the Giants, he stayed healthy for every game. Every other season, he missed anywhere from 14 to 2 games due to injury.
Well, you got to know when to spell him, and Gainwell does a nice job spelling him for Philadelphia. Let's go to John. He is John Schmeelk, our own beat reporter. I call him beat reporter because he is the college all-star game beat guy for us, in addition to all of the stuff that he does here. John, you need 8 arms sometimes to get it done, but I know you're working hard.
Just landed in Mobile from Frisco, so we'll be doing some Senior Bowl stuff from here on out. So I'm literally walking towards baggage claim right now as I got off the airplane. So I'm warning you ahead of time. I have none of my notes in front of you, so don't ask me to remember names. If you want to ask me about names, that's probably better based off my reports, because I don't have any notes in front of me.
Okay, not a problem. And you are landed. That's the important thing, okay? So we're glad you're there. Now, it seems to me, I've watched all 3 of the 3 days of Shrine Bowl practices up until just a little while ago when they ended. It seems to me the defensive tackle spot was plentiful. The overflow from the Senior Bowl to the Shrine was very palatable. I saw Jordan Phillips. I saw Zeke Biggers. I saw C.J. West. I saw J.J. Pegues. John, I'm really impressed with the defensive tackle class. I can't even imagine how good the Senior Bowl DTs are going to be if the Shrine Bowl guys were this good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the 2 guys you mentioned that really jumped out to me. And I thought Biggers was pretty good. I thought Peck was pretty good. But I think Jordan Phillips and C.J. West are the 2 guys that really popped to me. Jordan Phillips out of Maryland, he's really bursty. He's got a lot of juice to him now. He went through his whole college career, 3 years at Maryland, without getting a sack. So that's a real thing. And you have to wonder why the production isn't, what you want it to be. But he has a lot of burst. And he's a guy that would play 3 technique. He's around 300 pounds. So that's West from Indiana. He was a transfer from Kent. He's only 1 year in Indiana. He's more of a plugger. He's not as athletic as Phillips is, but he's a guy that I think you can put, not overly big. I think he's like 315. You could put him next to a Dexter Lawrence. He can give you a little bit of pass rush. He'll give you some good all-around play as a run stopper. I think those are probably the 2 best defensive tackles there, at least in my opinion.
Now, John, let me just ask you real quick about 2 guys who weren't there, and we expected them to be. Michigan defensive tackle Kenneth Grant, first-round pick written all over him. East Carolina corner Siobhan Revel. Neither one of those guys were there. Revel, of course, with the ACL injury. What did they tell you about them not participating, and are they going to be at the Senior Bowl to at least do interviews?
Well, both guys were there. They just didn't participate.
Right.
Ravel was there. I just missed interviewing him. They literally ran out of time right before I was about to get him. So Javon Ravel was certainly there. And Kenneth Grant, I did not lay eyes on him, but somebody told me that they did see him and that he was there. He's still recovering from ACL. He's a ways off from being ready to play football, to be totally honest with you. Remember, he tore his ACL in September. So I think there is a ways to go there in terms of Javon Ravel and him being ready to go. So that's something to keep an eye on with him. Grant, I think he was there doing interviews. I don't know if he was in meetings. He was not at the first practice. I was told he was supposed to be at the second practice. I did not personally see him. I do not expect either guy to be at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, so the two players that I've seen, both you and your practice reports up on Giants.com and a bunch of the other reporters that are down in Texas, two names I've seen a lot these last couple of days. Quarterback Kyle McCord, who is probably the top quarterback participating in the Shrine Bowl this week, and then cornerback Kobe Bryant from Kansas. What did you see out of those two guys?
Yeah, Kobe Bryant was excellent. Undersized corner in terms of his weight, only about 178 pounds, but he's long. 6'1", 6'2". He's physical at the line of scrimmage. He's long, likes to play man-to-man. Got his second practice. I watched him pretty ardently. Had three pass breaks up and an interception. Knows how to get his hand on the football. They get called for defensive pass interference penalties, so it could be a little bit too physical sometimes. That's something to keep an eye on. And who's the first guy you asked me about? I'm sorry?
Kyle McCord.
Yeah, look, McCord, it wasn't like a revelation watching him, but look, he's a big guy. He's a guy that has a good arm. He can move around a little bit. So that was impressive when you kept an eye on him in terms of how he played. I think he was the best quarterback there, most physically gifted quarterback there. I think he's still probably a early day 3 pick, maybe a 4th round area type of guy. But he was definitely the most talented quarterback there.
John, there was one guy this morning, and I wonder how much you talked about him in the first 2 days before you got on the plane. Thomas Perry out of Middlebury, the center guard, who today had some awesome reps against Nazir Stackhouse. The first couple of days, he wasn't quite as noticeable, so maybe you guys didn't talk about him much on the sidelines. I know you were one of the millions of people it seemed like were on the sideline inside the facility. It wasn't as packed today. I know a lot of people were leaving. But was there any talk about this guy? Because he comes out of Middlebury College, never heard of it in my life, and he's a little feisty son of a bee, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he did not jump out at me, to be honest with you. There was another Gareth Warren. I can't remember what college he was from. Another really small school guy that actually I thought had some good moments. In terms of the offensive line, Paul, Pete Kendall's son from Boston College, the center, number 66. I thought he had a really good day. When I watched him at practice, really fundamental.
Drew Kendall.
Not the biggest guy, just over 300 pounds, but I thought he was really good. Pete Kendall's son, big Rutgers tackle, Holland Pierce. He's like 6'8", 340. Moves people in the run game with like a big old neck roll. He was fun to watch. Brendan Crenshaw Dixon out of Florida.
Yeah, I liked him, John.
Yeah, he was a more athletic tackle, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
He's not your bruiser type. He's more of a mover, but he played both left and right, which I thought was good to see. And there were a couple of the guards that I think kind of, you're like, all right, maybe this guy can play a little bit. You bring him in, you develop him, you can develop into a guy that can play for a while. So there were some guys on the offensive line that I think were definitely worth noticing.
Gerald Christian Lichtenhahn out of Oregon State, I thought also.
Yeah, I totally forgot about him, Paul. Thank you for bringing him up. Talk about a big dude. 6'8", but only around 315, 320 pounds.
Yeah.
And, you see him.
Slender.
He's gigantic. And, you wonder, you're like, well, how well is this guy going to move? You know what I mean? I'm not sure how well he's going to move, but his feet were actually pretty good. The first 2 reps he had, teams tried to challenge him with speed rushes outside, and he did a really nice job of hanging with those guys. And he moved his feet pretty well. So, yeah, I thought he was one of probably the best tackles there. I was pretty impressed by him. I could see him being a early day 3 type of pick.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just going back to the secondary, I see in your article you wrote about Arizona State safety Shamari Simmons. To be honest, that's not a name I had heard of prior to these last couple of days. Just what did you see out of him in the practices that you were there?
Yeah, he had one interception on a deep post. I did an interview with him. He has to be one of the guys that's going to be on that Giants Huddle podcast episode where we do a bunch of interviews. He's a guy that played a lot of safety but also slot corner. He's one of those versatile guys, so that's someone that I think is definitely worth keeping an eye on moving forward here if you're looking for a guy that could do both.
John, there was a slot guy who intrigued me, but he got hurt yesterday, Elijah Huzzie out of North Carolina. Sticky, aggressive, but then we saw him pull up and get hurt late during yesterday's practice. What did you know about him before you left?
No, look, I think you're right. I think he was a guy that was sticky in coverage. Again, not the biggest guy, but he certainly was sticky in terms of how he was able to kind of stick with guys and play really good defense. So I think that is certainly a guy to keep an eye on here. Smaller guy, I don't think the injury is supposed to be that serious. I didn't realize he got hurt, to be honest with you, but he was definitely one of the better corners out there, especially in the slot.
Wide receiver-wise, John, the one guy, it was hard from the television coverage that I watched because they kept flipping back and forth between all the different drills. The one guy who just kind of stood out a little more for me than some of the others was Juice Wells out of Ole Miss.
Antoine Wells, you're talking about, the receiver?
Yeah, like they call him Juice.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't realize that was his nickname.
That's okay.
It's okay. I thought he was pretty good. I thought Meeks from Syracuse, a bigger wide receiver, about 215 pounds, Paul. 215 pounds, Paul. I thought he was pretty good as well. I was impressed by him. But yeah, this isn't a great receiver class. So Ricky White from UNLV. I think he was probably the best wide receiver there. I don't know how early he's going to go, but I thought he was good. So yeah, it's not a great wide receiver class. The wide receivers at this game weren't great either. But guys did make some plays from time to time. But nobody was like some weird, toolsy combination of like size and strength that really jump out at you.
I got one more guy I want to ask you about, and then I'm going to let you freewheel to anyone else that you want to mention. Edge rusher Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech. I thought on the first day he looked really explosive, twitchy, bend, athletic. Didn't have such a great day today, but looked like the first 2 days. This guy's going to be someone I think we want to look at a little more film about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's undersized. He's only 250 pounds or so, but he's got some juice to him. I think that was pretty impressive. I think he did a nice job. And the other, Ahmed Hassanin, who's a really interesting story, edge rusher out of Boise State. Not super bendy, but he's like almost 270 pounds, plays with good power, good punch, a great story, like moved to Egypt with his dad when he was 6, was there for like 10 years, forgot how to speak English, came back to the States in high school, got taught by his brother who was a coach how to play football for the first time in high school, and now he's here playing football. So I thought he was probably one of the better edge rushers there.
Yeah, that was the guy I was about to ask you about.
Okay,
so
that's all right.
I don't know if there's anyone else that you pops to your top of your mind of standouts from the last couple of days.
No, I think honestly you guys hit most of them. I'm just surprised I didn't get a Shedeur Sanders question.
Well,
he didn't do anything. You just spoke. We appreciated your question.
We saw you on the video. You're the one who asked the question about the Giants, and we applaud you for that.
Yeah, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I hate shouting questions in scrums. I think it's just unbecoming. But sometimes you must do it when duty calls.
Yeah, he didn't give you a whole lot, but hey, you got the question in, which is all that you can do.
That's all you can do, boys.
Any thoughts before we kiss you goodbye and let you head over to the Senior Bowl?
No, just that I'll be with you. I'll have a better connection. I'll be on our Comrex unit. Live from practice at the Senior Bowl coming up next week. I think coming up tomorrow, rather. That's going to be a lot of fun. It'll probably be like towards the beginning of the second practice, I think, when I'm going to be with you guys. So it should be good to come on and join you. I think it should be a lot of fun, and it's really a great group, guys. We could have more first-round picks in this group than we've ever had at the Senior Bowl. A lot of really talented players. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to check it out.
Before we let you go, John, any of the Giants coaches that were there, did you have an opportunity to interview them for the huddle or for any of our other applications?
Yes, both John Egogogru and Shane Bowen, who are coaching the same team at East West. I interviewed both those guys. That should be going up either today or the next couple of days on the Huddle podcast, and they'll be showing up on I guess our YouTube channel is more likely than not. And I interviewed probably around 20 to 25 prospects, just audio, and that's going to be, popping up on the Huddle podcast next couple of days. And
Close to
draft
30
season coming up today. Tony Pauline and I did a draft season previewing the Senior Bowl and reacting to what we saw trying to. So fans should go check that out as well.
See, folks, that's how we promote stuff on the channel. Nice job, John.
Do you know what day
Awesome.
it
I
is?
appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, John.
We'll talk to you soon, John. Take care. Safe travel.
Yeah,
you.
those the videos that he was talking about, the interviews with Shane Bowen and Coach Eggs, should be going up, as you mentioned, on Giants.com, the app, Giants YouTube, Giants Huddle podcast feed, either later today or probably tomorrow, I would guess.
Let's make something clear, right? Even though we have a full staff, in terms of these college all-star games, John is down there solo. He's got a camera guy with him. I think at the Senior Bowl he may have a second camera guy, maybe. I'm not even sure of that, but possibly not. And so he's running around literally like an octopus, trying to grab as many people as he can to do whatever he's got to do. It's tough swimming for sure. So we appreciate him for taking some time at the airport. How about that? At the airport.
He'll have a lot more
To
help.
check in.
He'll have a lot more help next month at the Combine.
That's for sure.
We'll all be down there. So.
But anyway, so look for his videos and his audio interviews. Pearson's got to chop all this stuff up. He's got his razor blade out already. He's going to be chopping up all that tape. And that stuff is all going to be up on all of your various links through Giants.com. All right, let's try to go back to the phones, and let's see who else is next. It's Cliff in New York. You're next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hey, guys. Great stuff today, as usual. Fits right in with what I wanted to talk about. You know, there's all this glamour with having the number 3 pick and all the excitement about the possibilities that we might be able to do with it, whether we trade it or we keep it, and who's going to be available. But what really counts for building the team is what you guys have been talking about the whole show, you know, which is what happens in the rest of the rounds. And I've got a lot of confidence in Joe Shane and his staff and their relationship with the coaches and their staffs to really do the best job possible with getting the most out of this year's crop, whether it's considered the strongest draft in the world or not. And I think there's evidence of it in the drafts that they've already done. The thing I mentioned to Pearson was, you know, when I hear about us having holes in the roster, I think that we're not quite up to the point where we have holes. You know, I think we have position groups and rooms, as we call them. You know, we have one room where there's nobody in it, you know, the quarterback room, and we have other rooms where you know, how competitive are we? And I just feel like we're still in a foundation building process in all those rooms, not just for outstanding players, but for depth. And you know, we're one of only 2 teams in the whole league that gets to play the 2 participants in the championship game this year.
Oh, thanks for reminding us, Cliff.
4 times.
That makes us feel a whole lot better, doesn't it?
But I mean, that's the worst part of the tough schedule. But, you know, look, everybody's going to show up thinking we'll have a chance to win each game, because we will. And when you mentioned Singletary, you know, it reminded me, besides the roster building, which I've always found, you know, very interesting and very rewarding, really, because I see us getting better. I really do. Is the culture part. And when Singletary, besides being the guy that was reliable for ball security and could, you know, when you look up after he carries the ball, it's always 4, 5, or 6 yards, which is no small thing. But he was a culture guy. He was the kind of guy they want to have around the team. And I've seen a lot of evidence, even last year with 3 wins. There was a lot of resilience during games. And it seems to me they got the right kind of guys that they're looking for, to where they didn't let games get out of hand. They competed all the way through. Dable always said that in his pressers. They competed all the way through. But, you know, it was also like in the first half, you know, when things could have gotten out of hand. They kind of held the fort, and they made a struggle, and they made a game of it, and then they had to screw up on an offsides or some crap. That just seemed to bite us more often than everybody else. But I think the culture part's there, and he didn't get enough credit for the leadership that goes to. So I just wonder how you feel about the rooms. I mean, are we competitive in some rooms more than others? It seems like, I mean, besides the one that's totally empty right now, it seems like we made a lot of progress, but I don't know if we're a middle-of-the-road team yet in terms of the roster strength.
Well, Cliff, you gotta look at a couple of things here. First off, you have to look at the youth of the team, and that's part of the reason why I think we believe the team is in better shape than a lot of other people do, is that most of these rooms are on the younger side, and the guys who are in those rooms showed enough to make you believe there is an upside to them. Now, that does not mean you can't afford to add. Because, my goodness, the Giants are going to need a really strong 25 draft class. In fact, Matt, I'm going to say it. I said it last year, and I'm going to say it again this year. I think they need at least 4 of their draft players, their draft picks, to give them at least some rotational snaps. It's important.
Yeah.
They had it last year. I don't know if they can get it again, but they need players.
No, for sure. And, yeah, I mean, even 4 rotational guys, I mean, you'd hope to get, even more than that. I don't want to set expectations.
Well, you'd love to get all starters, but you don't know right out of the box. That could be difficult.
For sure, but, considering you have the 3rd pick in the draft, the 2nd pick in the 2nd round, the 1st pick in the 3rd round, it looks like they could either be getting either, a comp pick at the end of the 3rd or end of the 4th. The 4th round pick is at the beginning of the 4th round as well. Like, you have high picks. You're going to have 4, maybe 5 picks in the first, 110, 115.
Right, let's go 2 starters,
picks.
2 starters and at least 2 rotational guys. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
I just didn't want to set the bar too high and say they got to draft starters.
No,
especially if they redshirt a quarterback in the 1st or 2nd day.
Take a quarterback at 3. We've spoken many times
that we
want that guy to sit. So that guy hopefully won't be starting a lot of games
exactly
in 2025. But I don't know, maybe I've just, after this past season, my expectations are a little bit higher now because of how many hits the Giants had in this past draft, that I hope for at least a couple of starters, with these high draft picks.
A lot of that will depend upon what positions those guys play.
Oh, definitely.
Because, if they draft, let's say, an offensive lineman high, chances are he might be a depth guy in his first year. He's probably not going to crack the starting 5. Possible, but you don't know.
Yeah, if a quarterback, offensive lineman gets drafted by the Giants on day 2, somewhere on day 2,
he may not be a starter.
You're right. That guy could be, at least in 2025, more of a backup reserve, depth piece. I would say if the Giants were taking offensive lineman at 3, or even trade down in the 1st round and take an offensive lineman, that guy I probably would expect to somehow find his way onto the offensive starting line right away.
Here's what I will say. If they take Travis Hunter at number 3, he's starting. Game 1.
Yes.
How's that?
I would think.
Am I going out on a limb?
I would think same with, Mason Graham, Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
Even though Abdul Carter,
he'll be a rotational guy.
That would be a little interesting because obviously Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau
He'd be a
are already
rotational.
there, but
Graham would start day 1.
Yes.
Carter would start day 1.
Will Johnson would start day 1.
Will Johnson would start day 1. So I don't know if that really answers your question, Cliff, but it really is kind of a case-by-case thing.
Yeah. No, it does. As far as, the question earlier in the show, why can't Joe Schoen do like the other managers do? It goes back to something that was said on the show a few weeks ago when Matt brought it up. You got to remember what Joe Schoen took over, what he started with. And I think to really understand that, you have to go back and see what his predecessor started with just 4 years before. And it's really been heading in the right direction. It's just hard to tell from the record. Mm-hmm. And as far as Saquon goes, we need to mention more often how many yards he travels with the Eagles before first contact compared to how many yards he traveled with us before first contact. I've heard different numbers. I've heard 1.5 versus 2.5, and I think I've heard 1 versus 2. That's just a huge number. And the thing that Schmeelk brought up a while back, if you keep Xavier McKinney and Saquon, you don't have Brian Burns. And that's something that's just not easy for people to grasp, with, locking up a premium player at a premium position versus 2 all-pros at non-premium positions. Who's going to understand that besides a general manager?
Let me put it to you this way, okay? It wasn't just about this past season, okay? Barkley's contract, as he just mentioned earlier, has voidable years on it for the Eagles. Now, taking the risk on him, and he was an injury risk, okay? The Eagles rolled the dice, and they came up winners. That's great. Not everybody who goes to Vegas or Atlantic City comes up a winner when they throw the dice. If you come up a loser on that, and he gets hurt, you are paying a very high price. Not only because he's hurt now and you've got a bad cap number, but now you've got to worry about the ancillary cap situation that's going to hurt you, quite frankly, pretty shortly down the line.
Yeah, I mean, according to Spot Track, which is normally, fairly spot on with these contract details, Saquon only has a $3.8 million cap hit this year. He signed a 3-year deal, so he has 2 more years, $6.5 million cap hit next year, just under $10 million in 2026. Then, at least as of now, he would be set to hit free agency 2027, where in this situation he would not be under contract for the Eagles. He has a cap hit of just over $19 million. And then the following year, a cap hit $6.5 million. 2029, a cap hit just over $4 million. And then in 2030, 4 years after the last year of this contract, has a cap hit of just over $2 million. So, yeah, as we said earlier, when you're a contending team that's a piece or 2 away from potentially winning a Super Bowl or contending for one, you make those sort of moves. You go for the win now, you kick the can down the road, and you worry about the cap consequences later. But, I mean, if you look at the 4 years after his contract runs out, the cap hits that the Eagles are going to have, that's not a contract that the Giants, given their situation, were ever in the, position to give. They couldn't kick the can down the road like that, have a $19 million cap hit for someone that, at least as of now, wouldn't even be on your team.
There is a charge behind the curtain that you cannot ignore, because at some point in time, you got to pull the curtain back and you need to pay it.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to consider and think of, because Brian Burns is one of the building blocks on this team. Even though he's just now in the prime of his career, they expect him to be here for a few years. This is a guy who they're going to want to be a conduit on this defense. They're not looking to, A, get rid of him, and B, look how banged up he gets and how durable he is. He's a gamer. He's worth every penny.
He's one of those dogs that, Brian Dable, Joe Shane have spoken about having more of those guys on the team.
Cliff, in answer to your other question, according to Sports Radar, which is one of the data services that some of the NFL teams use, they share their info with Pro Football Reference. Saquon Barkley this year averaged 3.8 yards before contact per carry. For his career, his number is only 2.5, because during his time with the Giants, there was only one season, that was the 2022 playoff campaign, where he averaged 2.5 yards before contact per carry. That was his career high with the Giants. I want to give you the number again for Philly this year, 3.8. That is over 1.5 yards downfield before anybody touches him. Is it any wonder the guy ran for 2,000 yards?
Yeah, look, Saquon Barkley had one of the best running back seasons we've ever seen this year. I think that's fair to say. He was fantastic. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. However, as we just saw in yesterday's game against the Commanders, when they took Saquon out because the game was a blowout towards the end, they put Will Shipley in, who I believe was an undrafted running back, rookie.
Look what he did.
He had 4 carries for 77 yards, including busting out a 57-yard run. Now, Saquon Barkley is miles and miles more talented than Will Shipley. But that just goes to show, if a guy like Will Shipley is able to find so much success but running behind that Eagles offensive line, then obviously it makes sense to bring in a guy like Saquon Barkley, because that's a sort of move that could potentially put your team over the top. That is a move. Signing a guy like Saquon is a move that a team, again, that is a piece away from winning a Super Bowl. That's a smart move. I mean, we saw the 49ers take a big swing bringing in Christian McCaffrey to the mix a couple years ago. And, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but it'll help them at least get to a Super Bowl. And prior to this year, be very competitive each year that McCaffrey was there. Those are the moves that teams that are a piece or two away from being a true contender, those are the moves that those sort of teams make. And it makes sense.
I'll give you a comparative, and then we're going to go. Tyrone Tracy this year with the Giants averaged 2.7 yards before contact per carry, which is still a full yard plus under what Barkley had with the Eagles. So even with the Giants' improved offensive line, and by the way, last year with the Giants, with the horrific offensive line that they had in 2023, average yards before contact was 1.9 yards. Okay?
Not great.
No. No. So please remember that as you watch the Barkley highlights this year. He is dealing with a much, much better set of circumstances every time he runs the ball than when he was with the Giants. It's comparing apples and oranges. It's just not the same.
Yeah, and, kudos to Saquon, because
absolutely,
again,
this is why he was worth the number 2 overall pick in the draft.
Yeah,
because he's a weapon. He's not just a headache player, okay? He's a migraine player.
When he is healthy, he is just one of the best all-around players in the NFL, one of the best weapons in the NFL without a doubt. Tremendous teammate, leader. I mean, we saw when Will Shipley had that huge run, Saquon was the biggest guy celebrating on the sidelines. He was going nuts. Right. So nothing bad to say against Saquon. I just,
I'm with you, man.
Personally wish he was having the success with just about any other team, but kudos to Saquon.
That'll do it for this edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Thanks to John Schmeelk for giving us a call from the airport in Alabama as he gave us some information on some of the Shrine Bowl prospects. We will be back tomorrow, and we anticipate John working from the press box, giving us an update on what's going on at the Senior Bowl. But until then, that'll do it for Big Blue Kickoff Live. We'll be back at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live tomorrow on Giants.com. Remember, on all of our platforms, you'll see all the kinds of content that he is shipping back that John was able to do down in Texas from the Shrine Bowl. From Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you tomorrow.